This is Jeremy Wentworth-Stanley. I'm the fellow who has a hyphen in my name. The hyphen is silent, but I am anything but that. In the full essence of timelessness, because this is a message this morning, an episode that is timeless. And it's timeless because we're talking about the dignity of the human being. This morning, and it is our morning because that's the time, I will say good morning, Sarah, and Sarah will say...
Good morning, Jeremy. Good morning, everyone.
And I will repeat, good morning, everybody. And this episode this morning is brought to you by Jeremy Wentworth-Stanley, and I am the voice of Respectonomics with my co-host, Sarah Benton. And what we're going to be exploring today is part 2 of a previous podcast we did, in fact, just a week ago, and it's called Food to Exist, Part 2. And I won't go over all the territory we did in the first episode. Suffice to say, this is part of a much longer series, but what it deals with is this. The food that we need to exist is in terms of the food that we need for our body, the food we need for our mind, and the food that we need for our, what would you call it, our soul, our spirit, our inner being, our identity, whatever word you want to use. Character might be one of them. But whatever that word is, there are 3 parts to us, 3 parts need to be fed. And we're talking about the feeding, the food that is necessary for existence. We're not talking about the food that then allows us to thrive, which is the sort of the upend of existing. And what I'd like to explore with you, Sarah, today is this. Last time we talked about the necessity of the human being feeding itself first.
Yes.
First and foremost. So it was a sort of internal look at yourself, feed your body, feed your mind, feed your soul. And because without that being in place, it is unlikely that you're going to be able to feed others. I think that was the sort of fairly straightforward calculation.
Right.
But the calculation I want to talk about this morning is the one where we look at, when I say corporations, truth be told, corporations, you can sub with words like family, community, service club, anyone you want, really. But the thing is, so many of our lives are so intertwined with corporations or with corporate life. And I want to be very gracious about this, but corporations are having a tough time of understanding the full economic paradigm they're looking at. I mean, the things are so confusing. But they're also looking at a lot of very difficult mental, psychological, circumstantial issues in individual life. So what we want to do here is talk a bit about how does the corporation feed the individual? Is that fair enough?
Yes.
Okay. So
and I think also you were talking about how you also contribute or feed the corporation as well.
Absolutely. That's the reciprocity of it, because dignity is reciprocal. I am dignified by you. I dignify you. It's a mutual equation. It's almost a sort of mutual dependency, in fact. But so if that is true, it must be true in the corporate world. And I'd like to look at the corporate world now from the standpoint of how does the corporation feed me? Now, in terms of the body, the corporation feeds me in 2 very physical ways. First of all, the corporation compensates me. We call it wages, we call it salaries and bonuses and dividends and those kinds of things. But that is how I am physically fed. And I think it's also fair to say that the physical surroundings of my place of employment are the other ways in which my body is, if you will, fed. You might say it's protected, it's a safe place to be.
Right.
I mean, when you go to work, you kind of hope that the doors will open easily. You hope that there won't be some, terrible sort of waterfall coming at you from somewhere. Yeah, these kinds of things. You think of a decent environment and you think in terms of you're going to get paid for what you're doing.
Right.
You get your weekly
contribution.
Contribution. So I think we're okay on that. Where the story gets deeper is what is the corporation doing to feed my mind? And I think a lot of corporations are not stuck exactly, but they find it difficult to think in terms of beyond the physicality of the human body that they're looking after, that they're paying for. It's almost like, well, what you do with your mind and what you do with your character, your inner being, that's your business.
Mm,
And that's illogical. Well, not illogical. It's irrational because the more the corporation understands and feeds me, the greater the chances are that I will correspondingly feed the customer.
right.
And not only will I feed the customer, but I will also be able to be aware of the customer's needs, how they're changing, because one of the critical issues today in the corporate world is that the customer, the client, has become very fickle. Have
Hmm.
you noticed? They will say, I mean, I was reading about what are those horrible shoes called? Crocs? You know the ones I
Yes.
mean? Yeah. And apparently, I didn't know this, but there was a great fashion statement of having ugly shoes. And I have a pair of Crocs, and I can look at my feet and say, wow, that's not so elegant. However, the fact of the matter is, the style of ugly shoes is shifting, and people now want to have elegant shoes. So
Right.
Adidas and Nike and Co are all moving to elegant shoes, and that's okay. But for understand that, to be able to bring that into the full corporation, I believe the employee has to be able to feel that. And for the employee to feel it, I need to be fed by the corporation. The corporation needs to feed my mind. And I think it's a fair question then if we agree with that. And do you agree with that, of feeding the mind of the individual?
Yes, because I think they need to focus more on just what our output is.
Right on.
Hmm.
And if I'm going to feed the mind, I think David, one of our dignity trustees, David is very big on something. He says, yeah, it's a great idea, but what is the next step? What are you going to do about it? Which is perfectly fair. And I think the first thing to do is almost an awareness that
Hmm.
the human mind is extraordinary. The corporation has this incredible benefit of having all these minds available to it. And it's a treasury. As a matter of fact, I must harp on one word there, treasury, because I would like to see corporations drop the title of human resources and replace it with human treasury because we are treasures and we have an incredible amount to offer. And the more that the corporation feeds my mind, the more likely it is that those benefits, those strengths, those complexities, whatever you'd like to call them, but they'll all come to the surface because they'll be fed. They'll want to come out.
Right.
They'll be motivated. So how do we, in fact, how do we feed the mind in a corporate setting? The first one, I think, is nothing less than awareness. Just being physically aware that the minds are there to be fed. We are not automatons, we're not robots. And the thing I have found in respectonomics is the more we dig and the more we look at people's dignity, the more we find. We find incredible strengths, incredible opportunities, incredible vistas that the
Hmm.
individual can bring to the table.
Bring
So
the human component to the.
exactly. But in order to feed this, how do we do it? And I think there are several things we can do or companies can do. And the first one is in the area of education. You know, I know when I was literally in the trenches, we were forever being given these courses and being able to take courses on financial management or, sales approaches and whatever. But I think education deals on a much broader basis than that. And I think corporations should be encouraging people literally just to be educated. So if you wanted to go and take a course on art history, go for it. Because all of these different ways in which we get educated all build our scope for critical thinking. They build our understanding of human nature. And the more we can do that, the more likely we're going to be able to reciprocate with prosperity to the company. So
Right.
being educated, I think, is part of the puzzle. The next thing is that a corporation needs to draw alongside people. We come and it's almost tribal. A lot of corporations are run on the basis of hierarchy. You're above me, I'm below you, and you do as I say, and I'll do as you tell me to do. It's
Hmm.
very, linear in that sense.
Right.
That is not a good arrangement. The arrangement that works very well is when corporations, when leaders actually draw alongside people And drawing alongside people, it has an incredible dynamic to it. I didn't know this till recently. When you draw alongside somebody, so if you're walking along with a friend, that in its or somebody, when you draw alongside somebody, that in itself is a healing process. There's a psychological issue I don't fully understand. It's the movement of one's eyes and so on. But when we
Right.
do that and draw alongside, we enter into a phase of healing. What could be more useful to a corporation than to draw alongside, understand somebody, and if there's a rift, to see it being healed? And the
Right.
next thing is we need to communicate. Well, everybody knows that. And you know, and I know that in the corporate world, a lot of communication is this ghastly, here's your email for the morning. Well, it's got about as much soul and spirit as, you know, artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is artificial, and those
Right.
emails come across artificially or synthetically. No, we need to have that personal contact. Corporations have got one thing absolutely right. They've asked everybody to come back to work. And the reason that's important is because it's people to people, and that's where the strength of an organization is primarily founded. But in order to have this idea, we've talked about drawing alongside, very physical. But the
Hmm.
other physicality is to break bread with another human being. When two people sit down and have a meal together, it does not have to be splashy. It can be a veggie burger. It can be a plate of potato chips, whatever you want. But it is extraordinary. When we break bread with one another, we break down barriers with one another. It's a
Well,
powerful,
it's
powerful
that
tool.
relaxing exchange that happens, I think. Right.
And it's wonderful. So not only do we draw alongside, but we also share a meal together and so on. And I think the other thing that hits me about corporations, what are they doing for me? And I'm talking about the mind, is to be sure that we are given the full knowledge about all the new products and services. You know, one of my experiences was that a new product was coming along or a new service, and it really wasn't what I call put in front of me. Well, it was put in front of me in rather a dictatorial way, as
Mm.
sort of, you will now sell this,
Right.
rather than coming to me and saying, we've discovered there's an opening in the market for A, B, and C, and around this, we've designed this product. What do you think, or how do you think it will go? I, I think that word how is very important. Why not have senior, so-called senior, meaning people up the ladder, ask other people, how do you feel about this? Because I was never asked that. And I think asking people how they feel is, in fact, very, what's the word? It builds people up. It's very rewarding to ask people how they feel about something.
Right.
So I think in the area of the mind, the corporation can do a great deal. And then we get thirdly into the more difficult area. And I say difficult because if you start talking about the soul or the
Right.
spirit, you can hear every board of directors and CEO and all that running for the hills and saying, we don't talk about that in the workplace. Well, you may not talk about it in the literal sense of the word, but you can certainly be aware of it and you can exhibit a sort of sense that you want to be compliant. I mean, the corporations love the word compliant. Why not have one soul compliant with another soul? It is, in
Right.
fact, one of the most powerful human tools we have. That when I explore your dignity and my dignity, and we put the two together on the table, what I'm really doing is looking inside. I'm running deep. Now, you may think running deep sounds like, that's getting a bit heavy. No, it's not. I'll give you an example. The Olympics. Do you remember the Latin? Oh, here we go. We've got Latin and Greek this morning. We really do. Because the Olympic, what do they call it? Slogan motto is, what is it? Citius, Celsius, and Fortius, which means faster, higher, and stronger.
Hmm.
That's the basis of it. But there's one word in there that's very important. That middle word, altius, in Latin means high, but it also means deep. I'd like to make this comment that if, in fact, you and I, corporately speaking, want to take the corporation to the highest possible heights, which I think most corporations would say, yes, we want to go higher. That's fine. Your foundations have to be deep. You have to look
Right.
deeper. The Latin for altius means not only high, it also means deep. So, whatever height a corporation wants to reach, it also needs to understand the depth that it needs to be working from. It's a very straightforward linear point. If you put up
Hmm.
a tower, a high tower, the higher it gets, the deeper the foundation. We need a deeper foundation. And the foundation of the human being is ultimately found in its identity, its soul, its character. It's this intangible area. But when one individual allows the soul to speak to the other soul, it's done totally silently, it's invisible, but remarkable connections start taking place. And
Hmm.
as those connections take place, so the depth deepens, the
Right.
height is then enabled to go higher. And from that, you get the harmony, you get the collaboration, you get the connectivity, you get the flows of new ideas. You
Well,
get
and I
the
think when it's genuine as well, it's also sustainable,
absolutely,
right?
absolutely. I think that maybe just sums it all up. When it's
Right.
the genuine article, it will last. And so
Hmm.
we have this human being with these incredible complexities and wonderful attributes that the corporation can tie into. And why that's so important is rather than treating the individual as the proverbial robot or automaton or whatever you would say, when you treat the individual as an individual, you get individual results. And the
Right.
individuality of a corporation, when it's successful, is one that they can be incredibly proud of. So that's where I believe the corporate or Respectonomics believes that the corporation needs to be looking at the body and the mind and the soul, the character of the individual. Now,
Right.
two more points to be made. We've covered a lot of ground already, but two more points. One is if it's fair for me to say, what is the corporation doing for me? It is also axiomatic. It's a moral imperative even, but it's also common sense that if I'm going to ask, what are you doing for me? I need to ask myself, and what am I doing for you? And one of the ways to approach that is to look at the corporation and to find out, what am I doing for the corporation? Yeah, I put in
Right.
my 8 hours a day and or 9 hours, whatever it is, and I work hard and I cross all my T's and dot I's and do everything compliantly. But what am I doing for that's the body part of it. But what am
Hmm.
I doing for the mind of the corporation? What am I doing for the spirit of the corporation? Because when
Right.
we
How are
get
you,
those,
how are you showing up?
yeah, I think when we start as individuals seeking to develop the mind of the corporation, when we look to the underground, the undergrowth of the soul of the corporation, what we bring to the table is values that are really, quite frankly, beyond value. They're incredible. And when we do that, the corporation is the beneficiary. And if the corporation is the beneficiary, axiomatically, so am I. The company that does well is the company that does me well.
Right.
It's straightforward. Now, there's one last thing. So we've agreed then, I think, I hope, Sarah, that we have the ability for the corporation to feed me. I have the ability to feed the corporation. And I say
Hmm.
corporation, I'll come back to one word again. We're talking about community, we're talking about friendships, we're talking about
Right.
any arrangement where there's an organization of human
Hmm.
beings. We can
Right.
bring these techniques to the table. So we're going to get into this feeding frenzy of the body and the mind and the soul. However, there is one thing to be left on the table. Respectonomics does not belong to respectonomics. Respectonomics belongs to the people. It's entirely based on the issue of expanding and deepening the dignity within which we hold one to another. That's its premise. And when dignity is taken out of the equation, as you have said, the model is no longer sustainable. So,
Right.
the one thing, though, and we have a responsibility in this Respectonomics team, is to enable people to be able to tell other people how to do it. And I think the most important question that any human being can ask another human being then is, under this heading of respectonomics, the question then is, how do you feel about your dignity?
Right.
Ask people to ask that and to get the subject going. This is organic. There's no absolute linear one line answer. But to be able to look at the connectivity of life, to be able to say to another human being, there's another way of doing it. Or, as I heard recently when someone was talking about changing culture, came off with this brilliant, brilliant line, we can do better than this.
Mm,
And I think respectonomics stands on that basic principle. We can do better than this. Our currency is dignity. It's universal. It doesn't belong to an individual. It's something that is, in the full sense, democratic. It's ubiquitous. It belongs to everybody. And I think when we all get into this business of spreading the dignity, giving people back the respect to which they're entitled and the respect that you and I are entitled to for ourselves, we will end up with a world that can come up against all the storms that we seem to be looking at today and maybe even tomorrow. I rest my case.
wonderful. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Sarah.